Thank you very much, guys, for having me. I wanted to say that it's a testament to the culture here at ING to have so many people turn up for a talk called High Performance Life in the 21st Century. I guess you probably don't know what to expect. I'm excited to share it all with you, and the first thing that I want to share is actually my vision, which is to get rid of the two phrases, "I'm too busy" and "I don't have time for that." So who's ever had those phrases get in the way of anything that you want to do, and particularly in the way of high performance? Okay, great. All right, so there we go. Oh. Got too anxious with the clicker. All right, so I'm an introverted, lazy scatterbrain, so naturally I'm here to talk to you about high performance. And the reasons I told you those specific things about me we'll come back to a little bit after we get on the same page with high performance and what it means to us. When I do talks like this, I prefer to do them more as a discussion, so I hope you guys are ready to be willing to jump in and contribute some stuff. When we throw the words up, high performance, what does that actually mean to you guys? Give me some words and I'll throw them up here on the whiteboard. I heard someone say excel.
Better than your peers.
Better than your peers, did you say? Nice.
Effective.
Effective?
Do more with less. Be efficient.
Efficient? I like that. Consistent?
Maximize. Happy.
Happy, I like that. I heard maximize. We'll get that one up there. Sorry for my writing. We got any other words that really connect us with high performance, or what we feel high performance is?
Achieving your goals.
Goals? Courage, I like that. You guys are on fire already.
Best practice.
Yeah, here we go. Best practice, nice. We're happy with that as a list. Anything else?
Achievement.
Achievement?
Above and beyond.
Above and beyond? What is good? Nice, so that's a pretty good list right there. So let's transition over to some challenges, because my intent is for you guys to walk away with a lot more answers than questions. And if I get a sense for the fact that you might have a lot of questions, I'll make sure I leave enough time at the end for a lot of Q&A, all right? So any questions you have along the way, just sort of keep them in mind, write them down, whatever you got to do, and I'll answer as many of them as I can. But let's get some challenges down. Like, we've got all these identifications of what high performance means to us. What are some of the things that get in our way?
They don't have time.
Nice. So time.
Motivation.
So, I heard resources and motivation. Yep, that's awesome.
Your kids.
Yep, that's a definite. Fitness. I like that. So physicality, yes, for sure. Information, is that more around like knowledge, like knowing what to do? Yeah?
Well, you need to have certain information to, for example, like physical training, and is this sort of exercise good for the purpose that I'm doing?
Awesome. Yep. Okay, I'm with you. So we'll leave it at that. I understand everyone's on that page now. So it's knowing enough information to have the evidence we need and the data we've collected to get started on something. Do we have other big challenges and barriers?
Your mindset.
Mindset?
Money. Just lazy.
Well, actually, I like that one because I mentioned that about myself, and I'm about to come to that. So if we say lazy, would be a little bit tied in, I guess, with motivation here.
Money.
Morning, did you say?
Money.
Money. Oh, sorry. Money. So we'll put finance. We happy with that as the main challenges? Fears, yep, because we had courage. So of course, fear does definitely get in the way. So we're going to come back to all of that, so there's a reason why. And look, I'm going to throw a few pictures up every now and then, and everything I do is sort of intentional. I want to keep the theme a little bit primitive because it is related to some of our psychology and things like that. So this picture is just to get us thinking. I want to ask one last question before I go into a little bit more about myself, so you understand where I'm coming from. So who got up this morning, probably after pressing snooze maybe about 4 times, got out of bed, walked the same exact path to the same bathroom you always use, probably use the bathroom, moved the exact same way to the next part of the house, maybe you got changed, you probably put your clothes on in the exact same order, or if you wanted to be a little bit crazy for the day, maybe shirt then undies, you know, just to mix it up. But if you mixed it up, you probably didn't feel quite right about it. Eventually, you probably made your way to the kitchen, packed the same food, prepared all the same things you'd normally take with you before jumping in the car, driving the exact same way to work, parking in the exact same spot, unless it wasn't available. Of course, you'd go to backup spot 1, maybe backup spot 2. Then you'd get out of the car and you'd see the same people getting out of their primary parking spots. Eventually, you'd make your way to the CBD. You'd need a coffee by then because you'd be on the brink of death. And you'd go to your favourite cafe where you'd order whatever the normal order would be, of course, the same coffee, so much to the point where the barista looks at you and just goes, flat white, 1 sugar, and you're like, and you want to try and, you know, keep him guessing a little bit, so you say, oh, I'm going to have the banana bread today as well, and both of you feel a little bit uneasy about that because that's just not normal. Eventually you get into your desk, you set your computer up the same way you always would, and you probably start by checking some emails. Am I at least a little bit on the right track? Awesome. Now, when we do those routines, do we ever think much about high performance when we do them? So that question isn't really designed to patronize or, you know, make it feel like those are just mundane things. It's actually to get you thinking about the fact that high performance is really not that far away from those things as you might think. So Meryl introduced me at the start. For those that don't know me that well, my name's Chris Penfold, and I really am a lazy, introverted scatterbrain. That's me in all my glory before I sort of started a lot of my journey. And the transition I sort of made from a business perspective, and I guess in the fitness world, is that I'm obviously involved with F45 at the moment, F45 at Wynyard. But originally I started just as a personal trainer and got to the point where I wanted to impact more people, so I moved into the online space and started doing a lot of online coaching. We were a little bit more involved in particular niches, so working a lot with athletes, particularly in the physique sort of bodybuilding space, as well as a lot of powerlifters. So some of our clients actually world record holders, particularly some of the female powerlifters we worked with, and we also worked with general population at the same time. So while I was doing that, it became really apparent to me that there was a big disparity between a lot of what an athlete would achieve and a general population, you know, someone that's just got general goals to be a little bit fitter. And it was nothing to do with the desire or goal to want to be healthier. I don't believe at all that anyone really doesn't want to be healthy or achieve their fitness goals. My belief is that we're just not 100% clear on exactly how to approach it. So I became completely obsessed with, you know, mindset, psychology, and all the aspects that make us an integrated being. So a lot of the time we tend to think in isolation, but we are an integrated system, and I'm going to touch on that a lot today. So throughout that process, I was obviously going through my own journey, and that's been about a 10-year process. Eventually it brought me to the point where I wanted to impact more people again. So that's when I got really attracted to what F45 were doing as a brand. And I say brand on purpose because I hope that a lot of what I mean by that comes through in today's presentation. Just like you guys have got some really consistent stuff happening with all the orange and the branding, that's really important for high performance. So part of all that obsession somewhat became a necessity for me because I was sort of in that same place. Obviously, it's hard to want to go from that picture in the middle there to anything different, but the result was I did do a lot. So as a competitive bodybuilder, competitive powerlifter, and then sort of learning to maximize my physicality just in terms of body control and things like that. So this was all happening while I was operating multiple businesses. So F45 is the one that's been mentioned, but my primary business is the one that is up in the top corner called Next 60. So we do consulting with individuals right up to businesses, and we work on essentially the things that you need to do to prepare yourself to go through processes like this. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's physical, business, anything like that, we can use the same framework to learn and understand these things. So for me to, nearly lost my mic there. So for me to go from all my glory there on the left to where I am now on the right, what was it that I actually discovered? So that's the sort of question, and that's sort of what I've become obsessed with, which is controlling and optimizing every part of my life. I just wanted to be in complete control of all my outcomes, and I wanted the same for my clients. Through that obsession, I got really good at it, and I was able to start teaching other people how to do it as well. So I want to teach you guys some of those insights. And again, if I'm really general with some of the things we start going through, I apologize. It's just because these are quite dense topics. So hopefully I get the opportunity to come back and share more with you in detail with some of them. So athletes, when we think about athletes, they have this affinity with peak performance, right? We tend to look at physical. Physical is something we can really understand when it comes to performance because we can see it, therefore it just feels more real. And we can learn a lot from athletes, not just from a physical side of things, but just the way that they put a lot of things into place really simplifies some of the things and the practices that we can apply to perform highly in every area of our life. So I've got about 4 different quotes. There's a lot of quotes from famous athletes and things like that. I'm sure you've seen them in presentations before, but my hope today is that instead of just putting some of this information up, I really do want to make it practical for you guys. So I want to give you the application steps. So when we look at these quotes, instead of just looking at it and going, oh, that's an awesome quote, I want to actually start to break down what these guys are really saying. So I had to start with Muhammad Ali. So it's not just a job, you know, it's just a job, grass grows, birds fly, waves pound the sand, I beat people up. What's he really saying here, or what's the message that's starting to come across?
It's natural for him to defeat everyone.
Sorry, say again?
It's kind of a natural for him that he defeat everyone.
It feels natural for him, you're saying? What else do we think of when we read that?
Guaranteed outcome.
Nice. He knows, he's very clear on his outcome, right? So there's a clarity right there, and he understands and labels himself, you know, as those things. Just like when I said at the start, I'm an introverted, lazy scatterbrain, but I'm also, as you saw from the way I was able to change myself, I'm also an athlete, I'm also confident, and I'm also highly focused. And at the different times of those pictures, I believed each of those things at the time. So our outcomes are almost a direct byproduct of what we believe about ourselves and what we label ourselves as. So he has a clarity, and he knows he's a boxer. He knows that he beats people up. It's a funny way to put it, but he's very, very clear on that sole vision. Champions keep playing until they get it right. What do we think of now?
Persistence.
Never give up. Persistence.
Strive for excellence.
Yep. Exactly. So you're spot on. So consistency really starts to come through here, and there's also a comfort in failure. So how many people here would be comfortable to put your hand up and say you're going to fail multiple times today? You guys are good. Awesome. See, and we spoke a little bit about fear being a barrier, but often, you know, something like failure is going to have some negative connotations. It's just sort of the way we're framed up. It's almost like I didn't pass the test, right? But the thing is that success and failure are like they go together. They're basically mutually exclusive. So that comfort in that and that consistency with the vision is again coming through in this one. What about this one? Winners never quit and quitters never win. What's Vince saying here? So Vince Lombardi, very, very famous American football player and coach, more famous for his coaching.
Perseverance.
Perseverance?
Keep trying.
Yep. Look a little bit further into it. Like a lot of these things, the same messages are coming across. Now this one is about labels again. So if you tell yourself you're going to quit, you'll inevitably quit. Same as if you tell yourself you're going to win, a lot of the time we don't believe it's inevitable that we're going to win, but we need to believe that first for that to happen. Michael Phelps, I'm going to finish on Michael because I'm going to come back to him afterwards and do a little bit of a case study on him. You can't put a limit on anything. The more you dream, the farther you get. So what's his main message there?
Sky's the limit, I guess.
Sky is the limit. It's true. So what he's saying again is that whatever he dreams or creates up here first, he will manifest into reality. So he has such a strong connection with that and a strong belief in that, it becomes inevitable. And we'll talk about the exact strategies that Michael Phelps used and uses. And it's actually quite interesting if you don't know the story. So we'll come to that. So when we look at high performance or high performers versus everyone else, where does that separation occur? Because if we break it down, you know, we all start at zero, right? We all start at the exact same level. However, at some point there's, you know, that gap that starts to form where people begin to achieve extraordinary things and then others not so much. So that gap and that change actually comes down to a single moment, and in that moment it's choice. So the first thing a high performer does is they make a choice. They say, I'm going to choose to have a higher capacity or work towards a higher capacity with something. So it starts with a conscious choice. That's then backed up by belief. Okay, so they believe, like we were just saying before, without a doubt that they will reach their goal. So much so that it becomes reality before it actually is manifested into reality. Okay, and the last thing, which becomes a natural byproduct of those two parts of the process, is consistency. So you will naturally become consistent with the things that you've already seen or you've already projected because you've already done it, essentially. Okay, so it's already happened up here. It just has to manifest into the physical realm or physical reality. So this is what we call the high performer or the success chain. And if we remove the link in the middle, obviously it wouldn't be a chain at all. So as much as each of the links is important, when we look at what the link in the middle actually is that ties everything together, it always comes down to that belief. So that's often what's missing, especially when we set goals. We tend not to connect internally first. We tend to go to externally influenced factors. So a high performer really starts and works from the inside out. So it starts with that conscious choice. They have that really solid belief and they commit to that process because because of that affinity with how much it's already reality, they're so committed by default. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into what makes us human and what separates us and a little bit more about our intelligence. So does anyone know what the main separation is between us and animals? And don't just say we're smarter, because it's actually not, I'm hoping one of you might know it, but it's actually, we're not that separate, we're not that different as much as you'd think.
The ability to socialise in large groups.
Let's keep going.
Self-awareness.
Okay. Any other suggestions or thoughts about what might really, I'm talking about, there's definitely, to give you a little bit more context and clarity, I'm talking more about the primary separator, like what's the main difference?
Conscious. Belief systems.
So the main one, and this is a fun test to do, you can actually, if you guys have got pets, you can go home and test this one. So the main difference between us and other mammals primarily is actually our ability to perceive time. So we're the only mammal that actually has a perception of future and past, as well as obviously operating in the present. Some of those other things were not wrong. They are separators, but our primary separator is our perception of time. So given that that's the case, something fun to do would be to go home and try to teach your dog or cat what tomorrow is. You'll enjoy that process. So this diagram that I've thrown up here, has anyone ever heard about the concept that we have multiple capacities or intelligences as humans? I'm sure if you've done a lot of these sort of seminars and talks before, if you've had people come in and work with you, you might know about emotional intelligence, for example. But there's actually 4 different intelligences or capacities that we have as human beings, which makes us optimal as humans. Do we know them all? So of course, IQ, which is the traditional, and then we know EQ. So we've got intellect and emotional intelligence. Do we know the other 2? Blank faces.
Physical strength.
Well, you're right, actually. So it is physical intelligence, and we'll dive into that one a little bit deeper. There's one more. It's actually spiritual intelligence. Okay, so that links heavily with beliefs and how beliefs are formed. And don't think religion when you think spiritual. That might be the most obvious thing that comes to mind, but it's more than that. So for us to be optimal as human beings, what we look to do or aim to do is to increase our capacity synergistically, meaning that we can't just sort of do a lot of one. Like, we could have this amazing high IQ, but if we don't develop our emotional intelligence, if we don't work on our physical intelligence, inevitably there's going to be some, I don't like to use the word balance or off balance, but that's essentially what's going to happen. One being drastically improved compared to the others will inevitably drag you down in some way because of that discrepancy. Okay? So who's ever thought of their physicality as an intelligence before? No one? Let's see if I can give it a little bit more credit, that it sort of deserves as an intelligence. So our body's about 70 trillion cells, and each of those cells has this huge capacity on its own, and they're performing a multitude of functions unconsciously. Like, we didn't even have to think about it. They're doing that unconsciously at speeds we barely can comprehend. It's pretty hard to argue that that's not an intelligent system, right? So the question that I have, and to give you some more context on this, is what then happens if we begin to apply conscious thought and effort to our physical endeavors? So we've got this tremendously powerful system, and then we begin to apply this conscious thought to it. What can we do? And that's where we really start to believe how powerful we are as humans. All right, so the essential autopilot. So I want to talk to you a little bit about why we should not fight our physiology. And I mentioned we're not that separate from animals, and I strongly believe that we give ourselves too much credit for how smart we are. So we really think we're so smart that we can just fit in with, I guess, modern 21st century life. But what we're sort of dealing with is our brain is a basic pattern recognition system. So it searches for consistencies. When you first entered this room, you probably looked at me as being an inconsistency because you haven't seen me before, so it probably drew your attention. Might have been a little bit uncomfortable with it, but now we've been here for a while, so it begins to become normal. If a purple elephant just walked into the room, we'd probably all notice it and feel a little bit uncomfortable about it. But the rest of the things that are consistent in the room, we generally don't pick them up. We're a little bit blind. Who's ever walked through an office or somewhere that you are like most often and you don't see signs that have been there for ages? That's why you can become sign blind, things like that. So those consistencies and things like that, what happens if you load hundreds or even thousands of additional consistencies onto a basic pattern recognition system? It's inevitable that there's going to be some issues. Okay, so that's what modern 21st century life is essentially doing to us. This is my interpretation of what we try and do when we fit our psychology into the modern lifestyle. So it works, but just not really that well. So the system itself is designed to only operate at a certain level consciously. So this number here, 40%, do we know what that represents? That's the number of unconscious decisions, or the percentage that we make on a daily basis. Okay, so those routines and habits that we spoke about at the start, you don't really have to think about it, and that's a good thing. That's meant to happen, and that's meant to be optimized. So we know that we're basically only at about 60% capacity. But every day, you're adding more and more tasks, more and more things to do. So we had some barriers up here before. We had time, we had sort of we basically had like resources and all these things that tend to get in the way of high performance. A lot of them are to do with the fact that we're sort of flooded with choice. I actually believe the only true epidemic that we face in the 21st century is we're overwhelmed by how much stuff is around us. There's too many distractions. So a lot of the time when we look at time, we're not actually busy, we're just distracted by how much things are going on. So how do we make the 60% work well, integrated with the 40%? Because we want to be at 100% capacity, obviously, to be a high performer. So if you look at someone like Michael Phelps, 23 gold medals, he's a perfect example of how you get both systems to work together and how both are as essential as each other. Does anyone know Michael Phelps' story? Anyone read anything on Phelps? Okay, cool. So that'll make it interesting for you because it's all going to be new. So Phelps was someone as a child that was told he would never achieve anything, highly emotionally unstable. So he was labeled as what we'd call ADD, and he was put into swimming because his energy was just so insane that they had to give him something to use his energy on. He was perfectly built out of the box for swimming. So they've done some comparisons for Michael Phelps. He's 7 inches taller than other guys where he's got the same leg length as. So a swimmer, typically long torso, short legs is the ideal build. So Phelps was already perfectly built for swimming. So the hardware was good, the software wasn't. The software was unstable. So he had a great coach, Bob Bauman, who basically looked at Phelps and said, I need to work out a way to get this kid to be a little bit more stable because he's going to be a world champion if I can do it. So Phelps had a system that was known as the videotape. Okay, so whenever people hear about this, if they don't learn a little bit more about Phelps, they think it's an actual videotape. But what Bowman did is he actually got Phelps to start to play a videotape in his head before every race, because before he would be so emotionally unstable that he would psych himself out before races, so he would never get that opportunity to use his capacity. So what happened was this videotape concept evolved over time, and what it would be is he'd get him to play the videotape before training every night, and the videotape was his belief in the fact that he would be a world champion. He would see how he swam the race, so much to the point where he knew the exact number of strokes that he would take across the pool. And again, not knowing as much about Michael Phelps, when he swam the first race, when he broke the world record in 2013, he actually did that completely without being able to see because his goggles filled with water. So because he played that videotape, it didn't faze him. He was able to do the race in the exact number of strokes that he'd already seen, and that basically flowed through his whole routine. So when we go back to looking at that chain, if we break it down for Michael Phelps, he made the choice, said, I'm going to be the best swimmer in the world. His belief came from that videotape, which was the fact that he'd already won the races, already broken the world records. He'd seen it so many times over that the commitment to everything that he needed to do, including the diet, the training, everything like that, became a natural byproduct of everything he'd seen on the tape. So before we go into some of the tools and things like that, I want to do a little bit of myth busting with you guys, and I'm hoping that this helps with some of the challenges that we listed here and sort of helps us understand a little bit more about how we connect all these things together. So I'm going to throw some words up. Let's start with habits, because we've just been talking about habits. That's what autopilot is. And that's what Phelps used as a way. That became a habit for him, right? That videotape was a habit. It was a routine, just like what you guys do in the morning. His routine was just set up for those outcomes, okay? So when we have habits, right, often they're viewed with a negative perception or sort of like negative connotations. We tend to think of habits as bad things. But habits with choice and with intention become really powerful assets because that's that missing 40%. Okay, so that tends to be something that is a bit of a misconception. What about time management? Who's had time management said to them so many times that they don't want to hear that ever again? We've all heard time management, right? Who can manage 1 minute and turn it into 10? Can't be done. So we've all got equal amounts of time, and the reason that time management is a myth is, as I said, there's no way to actually change your time. All you can do is multiply the effects of your time. Okay, so we're not really interested in managing it better. We just want to make sure we can get a better outcome from our time. Did I skip one? I'm skipping lots of them. Multitasking. Who's a multitasker? I've seen the hands go up. So you're multitasking right now if you're thinking about something else besides this presentation. We're sort of drawn to multitasking because we believe, again, that we're a little bit smarter than we are, so we believe it's a possibility. Multitasking is probably the worst thing that happens to individuals, to companies. Do we know how much percentage of our day is lost to distractions associated with multitasking? We want to guess? Not far off. So the average across the good data shows we lose 30% of our working day from distractions. So who opens multiple windows on their computer? So I think the common thing that comes up, or what everyone thinks of, is, but yeah, I can multitask, I can walk and talk at the same time, like I'm doing now. But what we fail to realize is that that's a different part of the brain. So that's easy to do. But when we're using the parts of our brain that are required for conscious thought and problem solving, the things that we're most doing at work, you can only do one thing at a time and give that one thing 100% of that conscious capacity. So as soon as you go to 2 things, you've dropped that down to about 50% for each of those, which makes sense, right? Then if you go to 3, it's way less than 30%. It's not linear. So as we try to take on more and more, it just becomes this downward spiral where we're basically operating as a third or less than a third of what we can possibly do. What about willpower? Who believes willpower is something that they have less of than other people, or they might think, hey, Michael Phelps could do all that stuff because he just had amazing willpower? Who thinks willpower is sort of something you can call upon when you need it? So willpower, if we break it down into what it really is, it's just like a battery, right? So it's at its highest charge literally when it's come off the charger. So for us, that means when we come out of rest, our willpower is really high. As we go through the day and things come up, willpower killers are things like suppressing emotions, taking on multiple tasks, dealing with distractions. So all these things take our willpower down further and further and further till we get to the end of the day and we might be susceptible to things like late night snacking or binge eating. So it's not that anything is wrong with you if that's something that you might experience. It's simply the fact that everything that's happening throughout your day is putting you in those conditions to have willpower at such a low that you're just going to slip into certain routines and habits. That 60% of conscious thought is all gone, and there's nothing supporting it and tying it to the things that you want to happen. You have to depend on that autopilot that we spoke about. Who does to-do lists? This is another one of those things that is a bit of a killer, especially in organizations, but for individuals as well. So to-do lists, the real question with a to-do list, whose list ever gets down to almost nothing? Like, who can get their list down to one thing on a day? So this is where our opportunity lies, to be honest. So for you guys, if you really want to take anything up a serious level, what should be happening to to-do lists is they should be progressively getting smaller. If they're not, then what's happening is we're focusing too much on what we should do, too much on what we could do, I should say, and not enough on what we should. So a to-do list is something I don't use in any of my businesses. We use what I call impact lists. So the rule with an impact list is it can be no longer than 5 things, and those 5 things have to be in line with the vision of what we're trying to do as a business, which is the reason we're all here. So obviously the reasons everyone's here at ING is we're here to empower people to make better choices in life and in business. So if we're not doing that and having an impact on that, it shouldn't be on our list, essentially. There's always going to be things that creep onto our list, but they should take a lower priority than what's actually on our list. Who procrastinates? So the classic one, if we relate it back to physicality, who's ever gone to join a gym with the best intentions, even done a trial of the gym, and then it's come time to pull the trigger and you've bailed? I like the honesty. So does anyone know why we procrastinate? Because it's it's a huge thing amongst people. It's like there's almost no example where we don't procrastinate on something.
Procrastination is actually an act of doing something. At least you're doing something.
That's true. So it does falsify that feeling of I've made a decision, but it's sort of like a mock decision. It's like we're pretending we're making decisions. But there's a little bit more to it than that, and it comes back to what I believe is the true epidemic, which is overwhelm. So procrastination is a bit of a defense mechanism that we set up somewhat subconsciously to avoid potential stresses and issues. So, for example, if I'm going to make a decision and join a gym, if I'm not 100% clear internally as to the reasons why I want to join that gym and what I want to achieve there, I'm probably going to start thinking about all the things that could go wrong because I haven't done the work and put the framework in place that I need to be so clear and believe in my outcomes that they become inevitable. So I'm doubting myself. If I doubt myself, that means because things can go wrong, I'll probably just fail and waste my money. So I'm thinking about all these things going, that's all potential stress, therefore I'll decide on that later. So I'll think about it comes out. Okay, so that's saying it's not that it's not important to me, it's just I'm not going to make the decision now because it's going to probably lead to more stress for me. Balance. Who has a completely balanced life? I'm glad nobody put their hands up. So this one is like essentially a marketing tool. So you can sell anything to anyone by saying, I will bring you balance, because it's that prospect of things being better because we're also out of balance. But that's actually normal. There's no one on earth that can get enough time to have 8 hours at work, 8 hours with the family, 8 hours to do what you want, 8 hours to work on your fitness. We've already run over the amount of hours. So there's never going to be true balance, but balance essentially comes from purpose and being connected to your purpose. A lot of people don't feel connected to their purpose again because of the distractions and the noise that are present with everything around us. We can't actually stop it. So we tend to end up focusing a lot on externally influenced circumstances. So we can cover a little bit more of this in the Q&A, but if you think about when we do fitness and things like that, if I was to say to you guys, okay, you're going to start a new fitness regime, the first things you probably think of, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, is like diet and the actual training. Yeah? So both those are externally influenced factors. And that's where we go first. So we jump forward past the most important part of the process and we concentrate on the parts that are, I guess, highly tied to the outcomes because we're thinking, oh yeah, I want to improve my fitness, things like that. We make the connection, we say diet and training improve fitness, but we failed to do the necessary steps and put the framework in place that are going to make that sustainable and keep that commitment going. So the lack of balance just comes from the fact that we're disconnected from what our purpose or intent is with that task or with that goal, and we end up slipping off the rails because we just can't seem to balance everything, which is the illusion that sort of comes through. So I put other up here because I thought I want to concentrate here on what you guys put up. One sort of like these challenges, I guess, as you'd say, I wanted to sort of talk about them a little bit more just to see if we can sort of give some reality. Now, fears is a good one. Has anyone heard, like, and it's popular in self-help circles, what fear stands for? No? So the acronym they use is false evidence appearing real, or false events appearing real, which, to be honest, is a bit of hoo-ha. Like, it's not, of course, if we think about it, like the traumas we experience as individuals, we interpret that at different levels of significance. So no one can tell you, like, if you had a traumatic experience, say when you were a child or something like that, even if someone else judges that, oh, that's nothing. No one can tell you how traumatic that truly is. Your brain interpretation is what's going to determine that, right? So with fear, that's our interpretation. And again, if I go back to our brain being a basic pattern recognition system, it's a generalizer, our brain, which is one of its biggest downsides. So if we think about it, like, let's say a common one that you hear is, let's say someone has a really bad relationship and they come out of it and the effects have scarred them to some extent. It was a little bit traumatic. Let's say it's a woman and then she goes, I can't trust men. It's not I can't trust John that I just broke up with, it's I can't trust men. So the generalization then begins to have effects on every other decision that is made in future, because that's the belief system. So see how it always comes back to a choice that was made on how am I going to interpret this, and then what we believe about that choice. That's going to then generate those consistencies in how we behave. That's why all this is so important. That's just one example. I want to move into giving you guys a bit of a takeaway. I do have an entire system which I'm going to make available to you guys, which is like a foundation process that we use to start working from the inside out. So we've got like detailed structures and tools that we use, and there's too much to go through in the time frame that we have. So I'm going to tell you 3 tips that I give, which are the most impactful and the fastest things to change well-being and high performance. And you'll probably be surprised by what I say. So number 1 is get 7 to 9 hours sleep every night. And you can feel free to question me on these if you want in the Q&A, why I say these things. Number 2 would be have a set sleep and wake up schedule. Okay, same bedtime every night, same wake up time every morning. And the last one, number 3, is associated, or it's similar to those two. They all revolve around rest and recovery. And I would say that you need to get your most important task, single most important task, done first thing in the morning. Okay? So I might move into a little bit of questions. Hopefully you guys have some, so I can give you a little bit more clarity on exactly what I mean by some of these things, and maybe how you guys want to use them, whether it be to enhance exercise or whatever your challenges are. We can talk a little bit more about some of these things. Yeah?
So can you just talk a little bit more about, so we go, we need to get fit or we need to lose weight or whatever, and we go, okay, great, yes, diet, yes, gym.
Yep.
But the pre-bit.
Yep.
Can we talk more in depth about
Absolutely.
that? How do you, in terms of getting your mind right, I know you went through it, but just if we can go through that and just
Of course.
make it really tangible in terms of what should I be looking for, making, you know, and turning that into a belief, and then maybe some sort of structure that I can remind myself daily of how do I...
Cool. I am going to give you that. So I'm glad that's the first question, because this is, so on the screen, I had it in the slideshow anyway. I figured we probably wouldn't get time for it, but you guys are going to get all this, and it's going to come with instructions on how to use it. So I'm going to give you a tool. So what we do when we break this down into an actual system or a tool on how to use, and it works really well for anything, but particularly for fitness and the physical side, is we start with a stage called Truly Know Yourself. So who's done personality tests before? So who's done, is it like DISC or like Trimetrics and things like that? You guys probably done really like fancy ones, right? Well, look, the unfortunate stuff is that there's only really one method that's backed by data. And this is unfortunately in a commercial world where it's all driven by economy, and obviously it's a monetized society. Someone's always going to come out with a product that just sounds like it's going to be better than another one, because it's like, oh, that's going to solve my problems, I'll learn that. But of those personality tests, if you've ever done one, has that actually helped you with your physical goals and things like that? See, there's a lot of, so there's only one way to actually, like, or one evidence-supported way to truly know yourself, and the reason that's the first part of the process we go through is, like I mentioned, one key characteristic about myself. Like, I'm naturally introverted, but I can stand here and talk to you guys confidently because this all ties with my vision and beliefs. So I already know that this is the right thing for me to be doing, and I live and breathe this stuff, so I'm comfortable talking to you about it. But at the same time, I do prefer to be in smaller social settings or, you know, things like that. So if I know that about myself, that's going to start to help me with how I set my goals. Probably not going to be someone who likes group training, for example. I'm probably going to be someone that wants to train isolated, but I'm also, given that I know I'm a little bit conscientious, I'm going to want some detailed plans. I want to know exactly how to take myself from point A to point B. So part of the process, and I'll answer your question just in a general way and you'll get the more detailed stuff after. Learn yourself first, because it helps you to identify what your potential strengths and weaknesses are and then how that can fit in with a potential physical practice. Okay? After we go through that stage, and that's the Big Five model that we use for personality, which is the only one, like I said, that's actually backed by evidence. So we go into like a physical progression stage. So I like to determine, of all the natural characteristics of human performance, which ones are easy for you versus difficult. Meaning which ones just come more naturally. You know, you might be someone who's naturally flexible or naturally mobile. You should definitely not be putting most of your time into yoga, for example. But a lot of people do. They'll just go, I'm flexible, I like doing yoga, tick. But they inevitably, that's okay as well, like if that's what you want to do, but you just got to realize there's going to be gaps in total human performance that you just can't fill by putting all your time there. So we like to identify which are the more difficult ones to do, and that becomes our more frequent practice. For me personally, like strength and speed and all the things that are more associated with like muscle related stuff, I guess, is easier than flexibility and stuff like that. So I can get away with maybe 2 times a week of really intense, say, weight-based training or heavy training, but I need to stretch twice a day every day just to feel optimal when it comes to being able to move and things like that. So by knowing my characteristics and how that sort of works, it allows me to sort of set that up. Then we sort of go through optimization, right? Like we try and learn gaps of, like, I guess, lifestyle gaps or things that are hard or easy to maintain or retain, right? So, for example, this should be really easy, and it is. So healthy and desired body fat levels all the time, easy. 7 to 9 hours sleep every day, easy. Energy should be consistently high every day. Coffee should be because we love the taste, not because we need it to live. Okay? So you should, every time you eat some food, you should enjoy every bite, and it should never compromise your body composition. So that should be easy, right? So this becomes easy by when we, again, if we go back to that sort of chain, if we're making choices, like if I say, I want to reach a certain level of physical performance, or I want to achieve a certain body composition, I have to believe so strongly that I'm going to achieve that all my commitments to that become natural. So the foods I select are based on foods I enjoy. Like, say I enjoy really fatty foods. Well, I'm going to find a way to incorporate that into my diet while still working towards my goals. So when I say that you should enjoy all food, you should pick these sort of factors based on what internally drives you and what you like to interact with, which then makes those external choices a little bit more natural, right? Time to fit in everything you want in the day. So often we can't fit exercise in, but this should be easy given we get everything else right with our to-do lists and stuff like that, because our to-do list should be short. So the spare time we get after we've finished our really impactful tasks go back towards maximizing ourselves. Because the reason you guys are all here, and ING, the big heads at ING will tell you the reason we're all here is to empower people. You know, you guys have that strong vision with the company, and I'm sorry if I mix it up a little bit, but I believe it's empower people to make better choices in life and in business, something along those lines, right? So if that's how they're going to determine like how effective you've been in your day, how much you impact that. So if you've got the opportunity to get a new customer based on the fact you're going to empower that new person versus just answer a few emails that are essentially distractions, That's how you start learning how to pick those things, and that's when that becomes easy. You shouldn't be stressed, like ever. So when I say ever, that refers to chronic stress, and that's a big problem these days. So when we talk about acute stress, that's essential. So acute means sort of momentary or short term. Exercise is an acute stress. We need acute stresses to tell our body to respond to something. Chronic stress is if anyone's sitting here worried about their bank balance, worried about what their kids are doing, worried about what their husband or their wife said, like these are things that are like chronic stresses. So that's something that should be easy to have no worries. Like you shouldn't really have to worry about anything except in the moment, because you've got less on your plate and you're really focused on your vision and you're super clear on just what you want to achieve as an individual, means that you're not filling your calendar and your tasks with things that are just not important for that vision, right? So that's where the stresses come from, is that we've got so much on our plate we just can't deal with it. What about ideal amount of time with family and friends? You know, things like that. I won't go into that too much, but look, total appearance. I look the exact way I want to all the time. That should be what you're saying. And if you don't, then that's where you know there's an opportunity to work on that, okay? So that's why we ask all these questions and identify these things, is we use it as a more comprehensive assessment to say, where are my opportunities to make big improvements in my lifestyle? And then how does exercise fit into that? So my biggest advice for anyone doing any kind of exercise, when you step into the gym or into, you know, whatever it is, you're going to a class, like I can use F45 as an example because I'm obviously very familiar with the model, but what I find works really well about that system is that it doesn't require you to have any willpower or conscious choice in what you're going to do for the day. You've only got to show up and be clear on your intention with what you're going to execute in that room. And if you are, you'll get results. And that's why you start to see result production on a mass scale versus people going into a gym overwhelmed by choice again, and eventually just going, this is too hard, and quitting. So if you know that you're susceptible to that, then pick modalities of exercise that not only motivate you from an internal perspective, but also ones that are going to be effective when it comes to the external side of things as well. Okay, so find a balance with that, and always be super clear on like your intention while you're there. So be present, and that's probably another big thing. And we can talk about all these things just as their whole own workshop. But our ability to be present is really compromised because of all of our distractions. We're always thinking about what's happening tomorrow, or, oh shit, I got a deadline coming up for next Friday, I better be ready for that. But we find it really difficult, and I struggled with this a lot, hence why I became obsessed with all this stuff. I could never actually just be present. I remember the first time I tried to meditate. Who meditates here? Awesome. When you, maybe not now, but when you first did it, and I still have this even now, even though I know about all this stuff, you try to sit quietly with no thoughts. That is the hardest thing, like one of the most challenging things you'll ever do. Like, give me a 280 kilo deadlift any day over trying to quiet my brain. It's just the fact that there's so much going on that we have trouble really getting quiet and really listening to ourselves. And it's until I worked on that I couldn't really go to that extra level with some of those other things as well. So I know that's a long answer to what you were saying, but as long as you start internally, a lot of those other things, it's not so important what the modality is, but it's more how it's executed. We're out of time? Cool. Well, thank you very much, guys. And as I said, hopefully that's helped and given you some. I'm going to share some tools with you guys anyway, which will be the more comprehensive breakdown of how to use this and what it all means. And hopefully that will give you a really solid plan on whether it be approaching physicality, whether it just be approaching better performance at work, anything like that. That's really what we want to do, is just have you ultra clear on the steps that need to be taken before you go and execute some of those goals you might have. And that's sort of what we want to do. So hopefully we can get rid of those phrases, I'm too busy and I don't have time for that. Thanks, guys.